Hello, and welcome to my What's Out There presentation. My name is Ian MacDonald, and I'm going to be doing my presentation on the program known as UFly. Now, a lot of my lower elementary colleagues in this cohort are very well familiar with UFly, as it is provincially mandated. So I'm not going to be getting into the specific lesson breakdown of UFly because I know we're all very well aware of that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to specifically analyze how UFly can be used as an intervention tool for higher elementary, as well as its importance in supporting students with dyslexia. So I'll give a brief overview of dyslexia and come to a working definition for this presentation. Briefly go over the kind of support students with dyslexia require based on research, speak about UFly in general, and then talk about the adaptations I make when using this for students in upper elementary. So first, let's just define dyslexia. There are various understandings of dyslexia in academic circles. Julian G. Elliott, in his work It's Time to Be Scientific About Dyslexia, defines four different perspectives. The first one being a word-level reading difficulty. The second one, a clinically derived subgroup of poor decoders. Now, there are two others, but we're going to use his first two for this presentation. Now that we have this working definition of dyslexia as a word-level reading difficulty or an underachievement in foundational word reading skills, right, the question becomes, what's the best type of support for these students? What's the best type of support to improve foundational word reading skills? Now, initial reading instruction is well researched, and many studies support the proponents who believe that phonics provides students with the knowledge and skills they need to read. So, UFly is a great program to use to build students' ability to connect phonemes to the associated grapheme and improve their reading. Now, this program does work. Holly B. Lane explored the benefits of UFly, she's actually one of the creators of UFly, in her 2025 study titled Effect of an Instructional Program in Foundational Reading Skills on Literacy Development of Students in Kindergarten and First Grade. This study analyzed 21 different schools where they had some classes who were implementing UFly and some classes who weren't, and the findings were apparent that students receiving this UFly scored much higher than those who did not. So here's the problem. UFly is typically conducted in lower elementary, as we all know. You don't really see it in grade 3, 4, 5, or 6, although sometimes you might, but very rarely. So if we know that students with dyslexia need the support that UFly offers, we need to make sure that they get that support, right? So students age out of the curriculum, so to speak, right? But they still require this support. So it's up to us to make sure that students with dyslexia, right, receive systematic phonics instruction and intervention later on in elementary school, right? Because there's students right now in our public system who require this type of support but aren't getting it on a tier 1 basis, so they have to get it on a tier 3 or tier 2, but I'm going to talk specifically about tier 3. Now, let's just talk about some things that I do in terms of the changes I make for UFly to use in upper elementary. So you'll see it mainly in the time. Now, UFly is supposed to be shorter lessons. I actually have it structured into longer, tier 3 instruction. So about 40 to 45 minutes. I've gone a little longer than that, but it's around that timing. I can adapt specific parts. So, usually I skip and condense early lessons, right? Unless we're going to, our foundational skills are, very weak. I'll accelerate or even skip through some of those early UFly lessons. And I can even use different lessons in UFly to target specific gaps in students, right? So I'll use a quick diagnostic assessment, pinpoint things that they need to work on, and I'll just use specific lessons. So if they need to work on vowel teams, we'll go work on vowel teams, or specific digraphs, right? And I'll target those. I definitely put emphasis on prefixes, suffixes, and root words, right? So grade 6 students will see multi-syllabic words, right? So understanding, how morphemes build meaning is essential to them. And that's lesson 99 to 106. I also definitely changed the language I use. So like articulation is very important in UFly. So it's important to work on that, but don't be afraid to like go off script, right? Try to keep it natural, try to keep it casual, um, because some students are self-conscious about doing this type of work, especially later in elementary school, because they feel like they should have a grasp on it. They kind of view it as baby work, right? So it's important to just keep that emphasis on we all need improvement. We all need to work on these skills, and kind of keep it casual. I increase the use of age-appropriate connected text. So at the end of a UFly lesson, there is that connected text piece. It's if you use the ones that they offer, I do find it for a pretty little kiddie. So I try to find high-interest decodables, right? So find texts that are written for older readers, right? So these often include more complex themes, characters, or plot lines. I also have a big emphasis on practicing with purpose. Okay, so I actually use Reader's Theater, and I've had a lot of success with that. I actually use AI to make a Reader's Theater text that is specific to their interest, that student's interest, and we'll kind of read it together. And I've actually had a lot of success with that. I link decoding to comprehension. So while we're reading in that connected text piece at the end of the lesson, students will stop at certain points, and I'll ask them, about character motivation, the theme, what's important. I'll also really work on, self-correction strategies while they're reading, right? So if they can't get a word, well, like how can we apply what we just learned, this phonics knowledge, to understand that word, right? And if it's us stopping and breaking it down, we will, right? So if we look at a typical UFly lesson, that first piece, phonemic awareness, blending and segmenting, I'll usually do about 2 of each, right? That's not the bulk of my lesson. If I look at lesson 2, or step 2, the visual drill, I will go through the visual drills as well as the auditory drill, because I think that those are important. Now, the blending drill, we do go through that, but I do not have them use the blending board. The online one or the physical one, I have a scribbler, and I use a pencil and writing in that scribbler, that kind of word chain, so that one, I have a record of what they're able to do, and they're going to be using the pencil in class, and it makes them feel like this is grade level work. Step 5, new concept. We always go through the new concept, pretty much exactly how UFly has it. Step 6 is the word work. Again, I don't use the physical word work mat or the online one. I use a pencil and scribbler and have them write out these word chains, right? Again, so I can have this record of what they're doing. And then step 7 is the irregular words. It's important. We do go through the irregular words. And step 8 is the connected text piece. Now we have some reading and some spelling. I have them read all of it, and then we'll write all of it out. And sometimes, if you look at, they're kind of like disconnected sentences. Now, if I look at, for example, one of the sentences is, the clock goes tick-tock. Jack has a big black truck. I'll try to think about what we can, what sentence can we come up with to connect to this first sentence, right? So, for example, if the sentence was, I want to go to the track to run. Running is fun. Whatever we can do or think of to add to that, we'll usually write a little something there, or even if we're just talking about it, I'm fine with that. Now, UFly is designed to be 2 days, we know, in these lessons. I don't take 2 days. The upper elementary students, their interests go quick, and I usually go through just one lesson in one session, right? And, I might see a student 2-3 times a week. I've also had more intensive supports for students where I see them every single day. But if I'm seeing a student every single day, we're not going to do it for an hour every day. We're probably going to do it for about 20 minutes and only incorporate some sections of it. So, for example, we might go over the blending and the segmenting. Talk about well, I had pro and semi-pro words, I say. So, if we're doing sight word recognition or whatever it may be, I call them pro and semi-pro. And then, we might just get into reading a connected text, right, for about 20 minutes a day. That's pretty intensive supports, and I've only done that, with one student during the year. Yeah, so that's kind of how I envision it being used in upper elementary and to support students with dyslexia. Thank you for listening, and it's been a pleasure.